Comparison to Mo's salaries, obviously, if Son was playing for Liverpool in that team, I'd imagine his numbers would be pretty good as well.
About 2 minutes apart, so whenever Sonny would leave his car at the training ground, Harry Kane would give him a lift home. Certainly Harry Kane wouldn't have the goal record that he has at Tottenham without Sonny.
He's being lazy. And if Son is being asked to play in a different way and do an awful...
ESPN은 이례적으로 총 분량 22분짜리의 손흥민 특집 프로그램을 제작했고 출연자들은 일부 영국 언론의 비판에 칼을 갈고 나온 사람들처럼 적극적이었으며 객관적인 지표들과 함께 손흥민에 대해 말했습니다. 일부 유튜브 채널에선 슈퍼스타가 지난 시즌과 다르면 주로 이슈가 되는 자극적인 내용을 다루지만 ESPN은 아마 어떤 곳인지 설명이 필요 없을 정도로 모두가 아는 그냥 방송국입니다. 그리고 케인의 전체 경력은 손흥민 덕분이다. 살라와의 비교는 팀 차이라는 발언은 한국 언론인조차 지나친 자국 선수 편애로 보여질 수 있기에 쉽게 말하기 어려운 다소 놀라운 표현들이었습니다. 손흥민의 여름 이적을 기정 사실로 받아들이고 있는 ESPN의 방송을 지금부터 만나보겠습니다.
So we're going to switch our attention now to Son Heung-min at Tottenham. James, you're writing a piece about him. For years at Spurs, he's been their go-to guy. It's been a tough run for Ange Postecoglou and for Tottenham. Probably a period where you'd expect them to lean on their top players, but it's gone the other way for Son a little bit. What's gone wrong?
And while everybody you talk to around the training ground at the club sort of says he's still that guy who sets the standards for the younger players, and he's been sort of taking on the responsibility off the field. On the field, we've not really seen it. He's been a subdued version of Sonny, really. And as part of this piece, I've been speaking to some of the Korean journalists who know him really well, and one sort of said to me, it's not the fact that he's not scoring that's the problem, it's the fact that he's not smiling. And he does seem to have taken the difficulties that Spurs have suffered this season really to heart, and you kind of see him carrying that responsibility, and it just seems to have dulled his impact this season.
I was a little bit with Kevin De Bruyne at Man City. What have you seen of Son and Spurs, and how do you think that situation is going to play out?
Well, I mean, I'm just looking at his stats now. Going into the City game on Wednesday, 10 goals and 10 assists in 35 games in all competitions, so it's not that bad. It really isn't. And I think the comparison to Mo's salaries obviously is credible because of the very kind of small gap between the dates of birth. But if Son was playing for Liverpool in that team, I'd imagine his numbers would be pretty good as well. They might not be Salah levels, but I think they'd be pretty good. So I think Son has been an absolute credit for Tottenham. I do think that, obviously, he's closer to the end of his career than the start of it, but I do think that you can never question his commitment, his quality. And if he's not quite at the top level as he was before, he's had injuries in recent seasons. I just think it's hard to question Son because of what he's given to Tottenham. In what has been, 10 years of I think he's been a great player for Tottenham. And I do think that his season this year is probably because the team's been struggling so much, and it must be hard to play in that team at times, but great player. For me, he's probably deserved to play for a bigger club than Tottenham. For his feats at the club over the recent seasons, he's never quite made the move, but I don't think anybody at Tottenham can question his contribution.
He is a Tottenham legend. No matter what happens to him from here on, he is a Tottenham icon. And I think the biggest thing that people want for him now is to have a trophy to, mark that decade of service at the club. Been part of one of the most prolific, in fact, the most prolific partnership in Premier League history with Harry Kane. And I do think that's part of the problem here is that, we sort of talk about the impact of, on Tottenham of losing Kane. Well, nobody would feel that more than Sonny, because those two, they were absolute brothers in arms, and I mean they lived very close to each other. It extended way off the field. They lived about 2 minutes apart. So, whenever Sonny would leave his car at the training ground, Harry Kane would give him a lift home. They were very, very close on and off the field, and I don't think he's been able to replicate that relationship with anyone else. If you think about Dominic Solanke's come in this season, done okay, but he's had injuries, not been consistent. Richarlison's never been able to stay fit for more than a handful of games at a time, and he's not a centre forward. This is the other thing. People sort of talk about, is he better on the left? Is he better through the middle? You talk to most people who know him as well, that sort of say actually he prefers to play out on the left. He's better out on the left. To bring up when we talk about stats, is as part of this piece we were looking into his sprints and his distances covered in matches, and I think this is quite significant that in terms of sprints per game, he averages about 19 per game in the 3 or 4 seasons before Postecoglou turned up. So it was about 19 per game. And in Postecoglou's first full season, he was averaging 24.5 sprints a game. So that's more than 5 more a game every game. And that's obviously reflective of not just the intensity that Postecoglou's asking his front players to press with, but also you're asking a 32-year-old now to go and do that 3 days a week. No blame assigned to him, really. It's just, we were just talking before we started recording about the comparison with Salah, weren't we? About what Salah's asked to do off the ball. You were at the Manchester City-Liverpool game the other day.
Well, yeah, and it's noticeable that Salah isn't asked to do an awful lot off the ball, and that's not to say that he's being lazy, but Liverpool play in a way that allows him to kind of stand out on the wing, not do an awful lot going towards his own goal, because Liverpool know that if you can get him the ball in space, that he's going to be able to hurt the opposition, and you'll benefit from that. And it's very rare that you're going to find an opposition fullback motoring past Mo Salah, because in the back of his mind he's thinking, well, in 2 seconds he could be going the other way and I'm going to have to chase him all the way back. If you're planning to play Liverpool, you're focusing on how to stop. And if Son is being asked to play in a different way and do an awful lot of work off the ball, and all these added sprints because of the way that Ange Postecoglou wants to play, the comparison isn't really fair. And I know that they're sort of, in terms of age, are very, very similar. In terms of the position they play, are very, very similar. But actually, they're being asked to play 2 entirely different games almost.
That's the point, isn't it? I mean, the point you're making there is right about playing for Ange Postecoglou's team. How many of those sprints are going in the right direction, or how many are going in the wrong direction towards, his own goal and having to help the team defend? Because Postecoglou's teams do require a lot of sprinting back to help cover, and I think that doesn't help Son. I think, ideally he'd probably have found a coach or a club that would have suited his game a little bit more, but that's just the situation, isn't it, with Tottenham? He's in a team that doesn't quite suit where he is right now. But I think one thing I wanted to add just before we kind of go on to that, attacking players from Germany find it really hard to settle in the Premier League, and Shinji Kagawa at Man United and Henrik Mkhitaryan at United and Arsenal. But Son has been, pretty much from day one, a top player at Tottenham, so he's made that transition that a lot of players find it so difficult to do, and I think you have to give him credit for that as well. And 10 years of being an absolute star performer for Tottenham
because of one guy. And look, I mean, I'm up at the Tottenham training ground fairly regularly, and every single time, without fail, there are anywhere between 30, 40 to maybe 100, 120 people who are all holding Son shirts, Son banners. They want one man, they're only interested in Sonny. And more often than not, he goes down, he spends some time with them, he takes selfies, he signs autographs, all that kind of stuff. And we're talking about a guy who's been there for 9, going on 10 years. It's not a new signing. And still the people come.
For me, Son has been the absolute number one part of Harry Kane's success at Tottenham when they were there. The partnership was incredible in terms of the goals together and the assists together. And just to explain how big a part it was in Harry Kane's career.
I don't think certainly Harry Kane wouldn't have the goal record that he has at Tottenham without Sonny.
Spurs obviously got to a Champions League final with a really fantastic team. You talk about Vertonghen. Son would be the last one of those to leave, which feels closer than ever now. Will it feel like the end of an era? And what will that do to kind of Spurs fans?
Yeah, it absolutely will feel like an end of an era, completely. And I think there are a lot of Spurs fans who can't really countenance life without Son and Kane. It's hard enough losing Kane, to lose Son as well in the space of what could be a couple of years. And the other players you've mentioned, that sort of Pochettino team that felt as though it was one step away from conquering the world, but never quite climbed the mountain. They're lanky, but again, they're not proven over year at the highest level. Maddison, again, you'd say on his day, very, very good, not consistent. Sonny, as we've talked about, has done it year after year. And
if you were Spurs, is it now? Is it in a year? What would you do if you were Daniel Levy and Spurs?
Well, like I said, look at his numbers earlier on. I don't think they're that bad. I think 10 goals and 10 assists and a difficult season. I think that's pretty good. And I think he's obviously an absolutely constant professional. I think if you're Tottenham, I think you would definitely look to extend it. But I think the flip side is if you're Son Heung-min, Harry Kane's taking his chance to go to Bayern Munich and try and win something, and it looks like he'll win something this year. I think Son Heung-min does earn the right to go somewhere and win. If Mo Salah leaves Liverpool and decides to move on, Son would be a great replacement at Anfield for a year, because for me, he's the best kind of forward that Liverpool never had. He would have been a perfect player in the Jurgen Klopp team, and even the same under Arne Slot. I think he deserved the right to go to a top club. And Spurs are a big club, but with due respect, they don't win trophies. And I think he's deserved the right now to go to a top club and win a trophy somewhere else. So the question might be whether Spurs have left it too late.
Does he get that move, do you think? Does he get a move to a club that are challenging for trophies?
Well, I mean, you'd have to. I can't see Daniel Levy and Tottenham ever selling to another Premier League club. I mean, look, there was Saudi interest in him, and we reported it. Obviously, mega money on offer, and he had no interest in going there. You talk to the Korean journalists who know him well, and they always say the one thing he never talks about is where he might end his career, his future. He just does not get into any kind of speculation about that. So there's not a sort of fixed point on the horizon where he sort of said, like, I want to play to this tournament, or I want to go and try this country, or there's nothing that he's ever made public about that. And I don't think they'd want to lose him this summer, because I think also they've not got a lot of leaders in that squad. It's quite a young group.